This happened a long time ago. At the time, I was living alone in a first floor apartment. My girlfriend had been sick at the time and ended up in the hospital dealing with a rare disease. She recovered fine from it, but during those weeks, my life was pretty much go to work, go to the hospital to be with her, come back to the house for dinner, and then bed. It was a Friday night and I was alone, so I decided to distract myself by reading and watching some videos on YouTube. Hours passed and at 3 a.m. I was in bed with my iPad in hand, almost falling asleep. Then I heard it. I knew that sound pretty well. You see, outside, right in front of my bedroom door, there was a long corridor that led directly to the kitchen. This apartment was in a building built in the 50s, and the kitchen door was old and had become slightly bent. That means whenever you turned the doorknob to open the door, it would snap out of its place with a distinct clack sound. That was the sound I just heard. A lot of thought ran through my mind in the moment. Had I dreamt of it in my semi-sleeping state, or maybe the sound was real, but what happened was that the doorknob internal mechanism broke, and it opened by itself. Or, of course, maybe someone was in my house, and they just opened the door. At this point, my heart was racing, and I started considering my options. I had a broomstick next to my bed. You may ask why I had it there, but to be honest, I had it exactly because I lived alone and thought one day I might be in a situation like this, where I would need a weapon. My girlfriend even used to joke about it, but I guess that was my paranoia, which was now paying off in the most unfortunate of situations. So I decided I was going to take the stick on one hand and grab my cell phone on the other. I would open my bedroom door while calling 911, and if nobody was in the apartment, I would just apologize to the operator on the other end of the line and explain the situation. However, back in those days, my cell phone wasn't yet a smartphone, and it had this feature I found interesting. If you pressed on a couple of specific keys, it would start ringing like someone was calling you. It was meant to be used when you wanted to stimulate you were getting a call out of a boring conversation or a tough situation. Clumsily, I pressed on those keys and the phone started ringing. I quickly shut it up, and now it had become clear inside the apartment that I was awake. If someone was outside my bedroom, they certainly heard it. What was going to happen? I stopped for a few seconds to hear my surroundings. Nothing. It was quiet. I decided to continue my plan. I dialed 911 in one hand, raised the broomstick with the other, and quickly opened the door. As soon as I did that, someone sprinted in front of me in the corridor and quickly got into the kitchen, closing the door behind them. I screamed, "Hey!" and started pursuing, but a split second later, I thought, stop, what if there's someone else in the apartment? What if another intruder sneaks up on you from behind? In front of me was the corridor to the kitchen, but on my left was another corridor which led to the living room and office. The office had the light on, so the intruder must have been there, but I didn't know if he had company. I took a step back into the entrance of my room so I wouldn't be caught off guard. "Sir, are you there?" The 911 operation was calling me on the phone. I quickly explained to him what was happening, gave him my address, and he told me the police were on their way. They had a patrol car nearby, so I should just wait. Then he hung up. The apartment was dead silent. I was terrified. There were only three things I had been able to notice in the intruder. He had a light-colored sweatshirt with horizontal black lines, dark hair, and he smelled really bad. In fact, the smell was still in the apartment and I could still sense it. The police arrived 7 or 8 minutes, which felt like ages. The apartment door was next to the bedroom, so I managed to quickly approach it and unlock the door to let him in. I explained what had happened to the police, and they said we should go through the whole apartment and check every single hiding place. They had been in situations where a burglar had hidden himself for a long period, even after the house owner called the police to later attack them. The apartment wasn't that big, and it was easy to conclude that no one was hiding there. In the kitchen, it was obvious what happened. It had these large windows that faced in the back of the building where we had a small community garden. I had left one of the windows open, and next to it, on the outside, there was a large drain pipe along the wall. The intruder used that pipe to climb onto my window and get in. The police left to go look around the neighborhood for someone matching the description of the sweatshirt I described. While they were gone, I could still smell that horrible odor the intruder left in the apartment. After 20 minutes, they came back. They couldn't find anyone. The burglar was long gone. Luckily, he didn't have the chance to steal anything while he was in the apartment. But the audacity, he had seen the light in the bedroom through the edges of the door, and still he tried to walk past it to steal something from the office. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I went to the garden in the back to try and find any further clues of the intruder, but I couldn't find anything. The neighbor in the building next door was at the window, and I called out to her. I told her what happened, and she smiled and said, "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. We all have stories like that in this place. You should never leave your windows open, and maybe you should consider getting some bars to protect them. The next day, I bought a motion alarm and installed it in the kitchen. I never had another experience like that in the apartment, but to be honest, I never slept the same way in that bedroom, traumatized by those events. At night, I would fear hearing again the sound of the kitchen door snapping out of its place. A few years later, I moved out to a larger apartment in another neighborhood. This time, it was on a 7th floor, so much harder for intruders to get through the window. I live in a small condominium in a very quiet area, in one of the biggest cities in France. My apartment is on the ground floor, at the very end of the building. In short, no one has to pass in front of my place because to access the upper floors, it's done on the other end, through the parking lot. However, at the very back of the residence there's a common garden which it's possible to access the floors. It's stupid, the path is longer and muddy, but as it's possible, many newcomers use this path. I get along very well with 4 of my neighbors. We talk every day for several hours. To say the least, I have to take my dog out several times a day, and they keep me company. On October 18th, my neighbor confides to me to have seen someone pass in front of her window. She is the apartment before mine, and the man would have thus passed at my place to reach the floors, so he passed on my ground. I don't want people I don't know to cross my property. It's my yard, and it excites my dog. On October 20th, the man passed by my house while I was taking the dog out to the common gardens with my neighbors. I kindly asked this man not to pass on the land, and I reminded him the real way to reach the floors after he asked if my dog was dangerous. He started screaming, arms in the air, looked like an angry bear. Horrific. He seemed crazy. He yelled at me and would send my dog to the shelter, that he could do whatever he wanted to, and that he knew the common rules. After yelling 1 or 2 minutes, he left mumbling. From that point on, I was just terrified. Do I just go back to my parents? I'm afraid for my dog. She's everything to me. She saved my life so many times. I filed a complaint with the police and I don't want to play his game. On 3010, we installed a small camera hidden in a plastic flower pot and dead leaves on my land, between some bushes. We waited for one thing, that he came back, to have proof for the police and to identify clearly the man. Maybe I could get my stuff back if he didn't do anything with it. The camera's name was Eve, and it was very effective. It took several days before Eve was filming more than just stray cats. Meanwhile, I was just terrified at home, wondering if he was going to smash my car or try to poison my dog. I almost started to have panic attacks at work since I was late a couple mornings when my tiles were deflated. I had to endure stupid remarks from my bosses, a lot of anxiety. On 4/11, Eve filmed a guy stealing 2 pairs of shoes that I had left behind to lure him, and at night at 1 o'clock in the morning, he knocked over my ashtray in front of my door. That was it. I got him. I was ecstatic. I can prove that the same man who verbally abused me and was messing with my stuff. I immediately notified my neighbors, and in the morning, as she left for work, my neighbor saw him chatting in the parking lot, and she took a picture of him. I can even compare it to the videos. I can prove 100% that it's him. I refuse to let him hurt me or my dog. I went to the police this morning to show them the videos and make a joint complaint. Yesterday, Eve filmed him trying to get into my house. I'm afraid to be home. I don't like sleeping at night anymore. I'm afraid to leave my dog alone at home. I think I'm gonna move, even though I was perfectly fine in this apartment. My mom wants to get a lawyer, and I'm so afraid of her retaliation. I was a 17-year-old college student in France when this all happened. I was living in an apartment next to my college's campus with 2 roommates. I was coming home from class around 5:30 p.m. when I saw a guy waiting in front of our building. It was the kind of old building where you can enter without ringing. It was just a big residence, so when I passed him, not really caring about why he was there. 15 minutes later, the same guy came up to my apartment. He pretended he was one of Alex's friends, one of my roommates, that he was waiting for him, but Alex was late. He also told me the exact place where Alex was doing an internship at the time, and even told me about his schedule for the day. With all the information he gave, I was confident they knew each other, so I just let him in. For the record, Alex's father used to work for a big company at the time, so even by looking up on the internet, it was impossible to find anything about him. As a good host, I offered him something to drink and started talking with him while waiting for Alex. The conversation quickly turned dark when he started telling me about his suicidal past, and about the amount of guns he was keeping at home. In France, it was very unusual to have guns at home, except if you were a hunter or in a profession that required one. It was getting late and the conversation got darker, so I started feeling very uncomfortable with this guy. So I decided to give Alex a text just to let him know that his friend was here and that I was very uncomfortable with this guy. Alex responded to me a few minutes later, asking me to send him a picture of this friend just to see who it was. So I took my phone and discreetly took a picture of the person in front of me. After receiving it, Alex just told me that he was on his way home. When Alex arrived, I was relieved. He came into the living room and said hello to his friend, but then he just sat down, and an awkward silence came along with it. After about a minute, I received a text from Alex telling me, "I don't know this guy." At that moment, I thought he was just joking around, but after seeing his face, I knew he was serious. So here we were, two young college students stuck with a stranger that apparently knows a lot about Alex without even meeting him. We were both very young at the time. We didn't really react in a good way. Every human being in this kind of situation would have called the police or asked him to leave, but we're very lost and didn't really think about it. We were scared of his reaction if we would ask him to leave, so we thought, hey, let's eat early so he'll feel uncomfortable about not being invited for dinner and leave. But as we were dining in the kitchen, he just stayed in the living room and started watching TV without even asking us. At the same time, our third roommate, Polly, just came home from work. She entered the apartment and said hi to the guy in the living room before joining us in the kitchen. She then asked who the guy was and was not really happy when we told her about the situation, that we didn't have any idea who this guy was or how to make him leave. We explained to her our dumb strategy of just living our lives until he felt uncomfortable and left. And she started acting with us and just tells us about her day. At that moment, Polly was just going through a rough period and was telling us about it. Not a very fun story to tell or listen, but while she was telling us about her misery, the guy in the living room joined us in the kitchen and started laughing about Polly's story before going back to watch TV. It was really creepy. At this moment, Alex had enough and asked us to leave the apartment while he was going to deal with the guy. This is what happened after we left. Alex got back to the living room and started acting like he was about to go to bed. His room was opening on the living room, so he told the guy that he was about to go to bed and left the door half open while starting to remove his jewelry. He noticed that the guy on the couch wasn't moving or caring about the fact that no one was left in the apartment except for Alex, who was in his room. Alex went up to him and told him maybe it was time for him to leave as he was his friend and that he was going to sleep, but the guy replied to him, "I'm waiting for the girls." Alex got mad and finally put him out of the apartment. At the same time, Polly and I were going back in the building and met the guy in the stairs. He wished us a good night with a creepy smile and left. Going back to the apartment, Alex told us what happened and we started asking ourselves, who was that guy? How did he know Alex's full name? How did he know where he was and his working schedule? How did he find our address? We spent a part of the night trying to find an answer without any success. We learned from our mistakes and never decided to open the door again to someone we didn't know. 2 weeks later, Polly was chilling in her room. She was home alone. Her window was giving a view on the parking lot. As she was looking through it, she saw a red car parking. The guy was back. Polly got the very good idea to note his license plate and to verify that the door was locked. The guy came up to the apartment and told Polly the same exact thing that he told me the first time he came. Polly got mad and told him that if he was there in 5 minutes, she would call the police. That was the last he came. A few weeks later, Alex came back home after work, telling us he finally remembered where he already had met the guy. So here's the story. Alex used to go in a bar where you'll be able to play video games while drinking. Apparently, the guy was in the same bar at the machine next to him and tried talking to Alex, but he was too focused on the game and he only took the time to tell him a quick hello. We think that the guy probably followed Alex around a week or two that day. We moved out of the apartment a few months after this story.